In this video, we're going to show you exactly how the government spies on you. But not only that, we're going to show you how the rules were changed so it could happen quietly in the background.
So for those people, first off, who have no idea who the hell I am, I'm the guy who was behind the revelations of global mass surveillance in 2013.
To add a little more context, Edward Snowden wasn't just some random government employee. He was a contractor for the NSA, and in 2013, he leaked classified documents that exposed how the US government was secretly collecting massive amounts of data on its own citizens. Phone records, internet activity, even metadata on who you talked to and when. It completely changed the conversation around privacy and was a massive story.
A 29-year-old high school dropout says he is the source of those leaks about the government's secret surveillance programs.
To this day, Edward Snowden is still wanted by the United States government and cannot return to the US.
And I saw basically the government was violating the law and what I believe to be the Constitution of the United States and more broadly human rights for everyone in the United States and around the world. Under the framework of our Constitution, the government is only supposed to be monitoring people that it has an individualized, particularized suspicion of wrongdoing for, right? We think about this in the investigative means, right? Like all those TV shows where they're like, go and get a warrant.
What he's describing here is the core idea behind the Fourth Amendment. The government isn't supposed to monitor everyone at once. They're supposed to target specific individuals, and only when there's real suspicion of wrongdoing.
But what happened in the wake of 9/11 was a whole bunch of government officials got together behind closed doors, Dick Cheney and his personal attorney, sort of the Giuliani of Dick Cheney, a guy named David Addington. And this lawyer, David Addington, wrote a secret legal interpretation. We can't show you the legal authorization for it. You just got to take our word for it. And so they did this, and this became a mass surveillance program called Stellar Wind.
This is not a normal investigation. Instead of starting with a suspect and getting permission, the government starts with secret authority and builds the surveillance first.
Which they said was supposed to monitor the phone calls and internet communications, emails, and things like that of everybody in the United States and around the world who they could get access to for links to Al-Qaeda. But on that basis, they started doing this in secret, and it was completely unconstitutional. It was completely illegal, even under the very loose requirements of the Patriot Act.
That is the key shift Snowden is trying to get people to understand. Traditional surveillance is targeted. Mass surveillance works the other way around. Collect first, search later. Instead of watching one person you already suspect, you build access to huge pools of records in case they become useful someday.
But what happened was step by step by step, our constitutional rights were changed. And we weren't allowed to know it. We were never granted a vote on it. If you had a little search box in front of you, they would give you the email history and, of everybody in the United States. Anybody you want, if you could pull up their text messages. Anybody you want, if you could see anything they've ever typed into that Google search box, right? Joe, what is the worst thing you've ever typed into that search box? That lasts forever, right? And they have a record of that. They can get that from Google.
The important thing here is not just the government, it is the companies. Email providers, phone companies, search engines, social media platforms, and cloud services already store huge amounts of information as part of their normal business. Once those records exist in one place, the surveillance problem becomes much larger because the state no longer has to create all the data itself. Thanks to the Protect America Act, it can demand access to data that private companies are already collecting.
One day I got a hit on the dirty word search for a program that I'd never heard of called Stellar Wind. All I knew is it wasn't supposed to be on my system. And this is a little bit unusual.
Think about that. A mass surveillance program so secret, even intelligence employees who have deep, compartmented access into highly classified surveillance systems weren't supposed to see it. They were trying to hide it from as many people as they could.
And it turned out this document was placed on the system because one of the employees who had worked on this program years before had come to Hawaii. And this person was a lawyer, I believe. And they had worked in the Inspector General's office, and they had compiled a report, part of the Inspector General's report, which is when the government is investigating itself, into the operations and activities of this program.
That matters because this was not just a rumor or a press leak. An Inspector General report means the government was formally reviewing its own conduct from inside the system. In other words, Snowden is not describing some vague conspiracy here. He is talking about an internal paper trail.
Well, this was the domestic mass surveillance program. that I talked about in the very beginning of our conversation that started under the Bush White House. It had been unveiled in a big scandal in December 2005 in the New York Times by journalist James Risen. And so what happened was Congress passed an emergency law in 2007 called the Protect America Act, which should have been our first indication.
So a secret program gets exposed, and instead of ending it, Washington builds a legal structure around it. That is how emergency power becomes normal.
And what it did was it retroactively immunized all of the phone companies in the United States that had been breaking the law millions of times a day by handing your records over to the government, which they weren't allowed to do, simply on the basis of a letter from the president saying, please do this. They make the law comply with what the agencies want to do, rather than make the agencies comply with the law.
This is where it starts to look more like abuse of power than security. Once telecom companies cooperate, the government can quietly map people's lives through private records.
Well, I'm sitting here in 2012 with a classified Inspector General's report, draft report from the NSA that names names, that says Dick Cheney, that says David Addington, that says Nancy Pelosi. That guy was asked by the President of the United States if he would continue this program after being told by the White House and the Department of Justice that these programs were not lawful, that they were not constitutional. And the President said, would you continue this program on my say-so alone, knowing that it's risky, knowing that it's unlawful? And he said, yes, sir, I will, if you think that's what's necessary to keep the country safe.
They were told it wasn't lawful, they were told it wasn't constitutional, and they ran it anyway. The complete disregard for our own Constitution and laws is baffling.
And at that moment, I realized these guys don't care about the law. These guys don't care about the Constitution. These guys don't care about the American people. They care about the continuity of government. They care about the state.
That phrase, continuity of government, is doing a lot of work here. It means the state preserving its own ability to function during crisis and ensure the survival of constitutional leadership and essential operations during and after catastrophic emergencies. This can mean that ordinary safeguards are pushed aside. Snowden is arguing that once officials convince themselves or the public the threat is existential, legal limits start to look optional.
I want all your listeners, right, to go to the Washington Post, because this document that I discovered that really changed me has been published, courtesy of the Washington Post. It's called the Inspector General's Report on Stellar Wind. General James Clapper.
Some quick context. James Clapper was the Director of National Intelligence at the time. He served as Director of National Intelligence from August 9th, 2010 to January 20th, 2017.
He's testifying under oath in front of Congress, right? And Ron Wyden asks him a very specific question, and he knows there's domestic mass surveillance, and this is how it goes. This is how the top spy responds under oath.
So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
The public story and the classified reality are colliding. If officials are not telling the truth in open hearings to Congress, the idea of oversight breaks down.
All right.
So that was a lie. Wyden knew it was a lie. Clapper knew it was a lie. He actually admitted it was a lie after, but he said it was the least untruthful thing he could think of to say in the context of being in the hot seat there.
The senator in that exchange was Ron Wyden, and the hearing took place on March 12, 2013. Wyden had already been pressing the intelligence community in public about warrantless geolocation surveillance and secret interpretations of surveillance law. That is why this moment mattered so much. The dispute was not only about collection, but about whether the public had been given a false picture of what the government was actually doing.
Are you aware at all of the current state of surveillance and what, if anything, has changed since your revelations?
I mean, the big thing that's changed is now it's mobile first. The phone is turned off, or at least the screen is turned off. It's sitting there. It's powered on. And if somebody sends you a message, the screen blinks to life. How does that happen? Right? How is it that if someone from any corner of the earth dials a number, your phone rings and nobody else's rings? How is it that you can dial anybody else's number and only their phone rings? Every smartphone, every phone at all, is constantly connected to the nearest cellular tower. Every phone, even when the screen is off, you think it's doing nothing, it's screaming in the air, saying, "Here I am, here I am."
Your phone changed the surveillance game. It is not just tracking what you choose to do online. It is constantly sending background signals just to stay connected, which means the system can follow you even when you're not actively using it.
And so your phone is sitting there doing nothing, you think, but it's constantly shouting and saying, "I'm here. Who is closest to me?" That's a cell phone tower. And every cell phone tower with its big ears is listening for these little cries for help.
The more serious reality of what he's saying is this. Your phone is constantly pinging nearby towers, and every time it connects, it leaves behind a timestamp and a location. So every little check-in creates a record of where you were and when.
So you're going to be bound to this cell phone tower, and that cell phone tower is going to make a note, a permanent record, saying this phone handset with this phone number at this time was connected to me, right? And based on your phone handset and your phone number, they can get your identity because you pay for this stuff with your credit card and everything like that. But what this means is that whenever you're carrying a phone, whenever the phone is turned on, there's a record of your presence at that place that is being made and created by companies.
The unsettling part is that modern life now produces a trail by default, especially when most of us carry a cell phone in our pocket everywhere we go.
Now these things are saved. It doesn't matter whether you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't matter whether you're the most ordinary person on Earth, because that's how bulk collection, which is the government's euphemism for mass surveillance, works. They simply collect it all in advance in hopes that one day it will become useful.
They're not collecting because you're suspicious. They're collecting in case you ever are.
That's not talking about all those apps on your phone that are contacting the network even more frequently, right? How do you get a text message notification? How do you get an email notification? How is it that Facebook knows where you're at? They are trying to keep track through location services on your phone, through GPS, through even just what wireless access points you're connected to, because there's a global, constantly updated map.
It helps to think of modern surveillance less like one system watching you and more like several systems overlapping at the same time. Your carrier can see which cell towers your phone connects to. Your phone can measure location through GPS, nearby Wi-Fi networks, and other signals. Then the apps on the device can collect even more on top of that, including where you go, what you open, and how often you use it. On their own, each one of those pieces may seem limited. A tower record might only show that your phone was in a certain area. A GPS reading might only show one moment. An app might only log one action. But once those records are stacked together, they stop looking small. They start looking like a map of your life.
The scandal isn't how they're breaking the law. The scandal is that they don't have to break the law. And the way they say they're not breaking the law is something called the third-party doctrine. Third-party doctrine is a legal principle derived from a case in, I believe, the 1970s called Smith versus Maryland.
This is the loophole. Once your data is held by a company, the government can argue it is no longer fully private.
And Smith was this knucklehead who was harassing this lady, making phone calls to her house. So she calls the cops and says, one day I got one of these phone calls, and then I see this car creeping past my house on the street, and she got a license plate number. That was the problem. Was they went to the phone company and they got the records without a warrant. They just asked for it, or they subpoenaed it, right? Some lower standard of legal review. And the company gave it to him and got the guy. They marched him off to jail.
The bad guy was caught and arrested, so it was all for good, right? That is the type of reasoning government agencies use all the time, and it's effective because in a situation like that, we all want the creepy harasser to get caught. But here's the key part. The police didn't need a warrant for his data because legally it wasn't considered his.
They fight on this, and they go, it wasn't actually, they weren't his records. And so because they didn't belong to him, he didn't have a Fourth Amendment right to demand a warrant be issued for them. They were the company's records, and the company provided them voluntarily, and hence no warrant was required because you can give whatever you want without a warrant as long as it's yours.
There it is. Your data is not really yours once a company holds it. It becomes their record, and they can hand it to the government without your permission.
Now here's the problem. The government extrapolated a principle in a single case of a single known suspected criminal who they had real good reasons to suspect was their guy, and used that to go to a company and get records from them and establish a precedent that these records don't belong to the guy, they belong to the company. And then they said, well, if one person doesn't have a Fourth Amendment interest in records held by a company, no one does. And so the company then has absolute proprietary ownership of all of these records about all of our lives.
This is not just a government story. It is also a data ownership story, because once companies hold your private life as data, it becomes much easier to access and use.
And remember, this is back in the 1970s. This is the very beginning of the technological era. And flash forward now 40 years, and they are still relying on this precedent about this one. Nobody has a privacy right for anything that's held by a company. And so long as they do that, companies are going to be extraordinarily powerful, and they're going to be extraordinarily abusive. This is data about human lives. It is data about people. These records are about you. It's not data that's being exploited. It's people that are being exploited. It's not data that's being manipulated. It's you that's being manipulated.
And that is really the warning at the center of all of this. In a digital world, your private life can be turned into a searchable record held by companies, accessed by governments, and used in ways most people never see. The next time you open your phone, just remember, the rules were changed so the government could be watching and you would never know. If you want more breakdowns like this, consider subscribing to Classified Context.